Hello and welcome back to Girls That Gossip, the podcast where we listen to what's hot and what's not right now so that you don't have to. I'm Josh Reid, and as ever I'm joined by...
Busayo, what are you doing?
I'm Molly Woodward.
Hello everyone, how are we?
Hello, I'm well, how are you?
Good.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Now obviously Amelia is not here today. We are sending our best wishes, but we're gonna move on with that anyway. And this week we've been listening to episode 1 of 2 Up Productions' Limetown. It's a scripted fiction podcast where American public radio journalist Leah Haddock explores the disappearance of over 300 people from Limetown in Tennessee. Shooting to number 1 in the US podcast charts upon release in 2015, entertainment publication Vulture called it one of the top 10 podcasts of the year, with the series then going on to be adapted onto a book and a Peacock original television programme. So, with that out of the way, what were our first thoughts of the programme?
You go ahead, Busayo.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I feel like one part that stood out to me was in the introduction, where you could hear the police sirens, and it was just so interesting to hear the interactive thoughts of the police sirens in the introduction, and I felt like the whole podcast was really interesting. I didn't actually realise that it was fictional, but
no, I think we all said that.
Yeah.
I even had to search up. I got to the end, I thought, God, this is quite scary. I hope this isn't true.
Yeah.
Searched up and I thought, thank God.
Thank God for that.
I was worried, but I enjoy crime content in general and the genre, but I think this podcast did it really well, literally to the point we thought it was real, so yeah. I think it did really, really well.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto that a bit later, and this week we've also been reading Chapter 5 of Podcasting, New Oral Cultures and Digital Media, which is edited by Dario Linares, Neil Fox and Richard Berry. The chapter, I Know What a Podcast Is, Post-Serial Fiction and Podcast Media Identity, is written by the UEA's Daniel Hancock and the University of Salford's Leslie McMurtry, and we will be taking a look at that throughout the podcast, but in the meantime we will go for our first clip. And Molly, you're talking about the intro of the podcast.
I have the honour to go first this week. I feel like I've moved up in the ranks.
It's a pleasure.
Go on.
So my clip is from the very beginning of the episode, and I honestly struggled just to pick just one, but this intro really stood out to me. It's the introduction of Limetown, and I think having a strong, gripping opening is so important, and this one definitely delivers. It reminds me of our previous episode when we spoke about Uncanny and Room 611, where the introduction immediately pulled us in and made the podcast and title theme clear from the very start. So let's have a listen.
What the world discovered was the complete disappearance of every man, woman, and child in Limetown. 327 people.
Officer, what can you tell us about the investigation? Where is everyone?
Let me ask you again.
Nobody's here.
Nobody's here? What do you mean by that?
Everybody's just gone.
The story exploded, gaining international attention.
Our top story from the United States this evening.
Cenas de violência ocorrem no centro.
You've just been listening to an indecipherable 911 call as smoke rises.
All I'm saying is they need to check those caves.
They have checked the caves, okay? Enough with the caves.
Have mercy on the lost souls of Limetown.
And then, just as suddenly as the story of Limetown landed, it evaporated back into the 24-hour news cycle, swallowed by the first legal same-sex marriage in San Francisco, the announcement of successful human cloning in South Korea, war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, marriages, scandals, weather, drugs. The story of Limetown became a tragedy, among countless other tragedies. A ghost story you can barely remember.
So off the mic, we were saying this podcast feels really immersive. So I think having such a strong intro really sets the tone of the podcast. And like I said before, I really enjoy crime content in general. So this is the first podcast I've really felt it to be really visual in my mind. So it's the most visually engaging podcast for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, in that clip, I really like the use of the pretend news clips and the pretend 999 or 911 calls. Sorry.
Yeah. It adds so many different layers, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like adding on to that, the facts that there was the court cases, and you hear the pieces of the Iraq war and same-sex marriage that was to be legalized at the time. So it kind of adds to the what makes it, as you're saying, like often like what makes it seem like it was a real podcast. And yeah, so it's really interesting.
Yeah, and also when I was doing the reading today, it states that the serial podcast has been described as addictive and drug-like, where listeners need their next fix. And it also says that it's reported that fans of Limetown had said they were hoarding the episodes so they could like listen to it all in one go and like binge it. And I feel like I've definitely done this with like visual stuff, so like episodes on Netflix and things like that, but I haven't done it with a podcast. But this one really made me want to keep them all, so when I was on a walk next I could just listen to it all.
Just like save it for like
the
little jog.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you for that, Molly. Basayo, you're up next.
So the clip that I'll be playing is part of the podcast where Veronica Hoon, who was working as part of the investigation of the incidents of Limetown, he discusses why the events of Limetown were very shocking. And just before the clip I am about to play in the podcast, there were a montage of voices from the alleged victims of Limetown. So let's hear the clip right now.
What do you make of that?
That this was purposeful. It was following a plan, and it was done masterfully. I have never seen anything like it.
I'm sorry, I don't understand how could 327 people be moved under complete surveillance without anyone noticing?
Well, now you've hit my cutoff of understanding.
No ideas? No theories?
As far as I'm concerned, those yahoos selling plastic alien ships and rapture trinkets out next to Limetown have as good an idea as any. Not a day goes by I don't think of it. Did we miss something? Did we all miss something? I don't know.
Yeah, so I found that clip really interesting because it just like, I think it's quite like over the top, like 300 and I forgot the number, but over 300 people who were missing at one time, and the fact that like they all went missing and there were no bodies to be found. And I think it was really interesting, the fact that like it just seems really over the top and exaggerated, which compares to like the podcast that we listened to last week, guys, that you remember, Uncanny 61. So like that was exaggerated about the supernatural, and I feel like this is exaggerated about like missing stories and missing people. What do you guys think?
I completely agree with you. I think that's an excellent clip because it really, I think that clip particularly really enhances the story and builds the story. So hearing that, I feel like even if you just heard that little snippet of it, I think it would make you want to listen to it.
It was like you were saying before about how all of these different like elements adds layers to the podcast. It makes for like a good listening experience overall.
Yeah, agreed. And so like we were saying at the beginning of the episode that we did some external reading as part of this podcast clip, and one quote that I really wanted to read out is, podcasting does not only deliver the narrative, but it's meant to shape and inform storytelling. And I feel like this clip really like shows how storytelling is informed, because the fact that it's so exaggerated and you clearly see that it's over the top. And this also compares to another podcast I was listening to in my own personal time, because like Molly, I feel like true crime really is that genre, like she's really that girl. So I listened to a podcast called Serial, which was hosted by audio journalist Sarah Coyne, and it was about a 1900s murder case. And they reevaluated the evidence that Aidan Seans was imprisoned from the murder of his ex-girlfriend Heyman Lee. So I feel like this really like compares to like this podcast, because whereas that one was real, this one was a fake story. So I think that's what really interests me. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Well, thank you for that, Busayo. Now, obviously, Amelia isn't here, but we're still going to talk about her clip. And this one is about the presenter Leah Haddock, which we will discuss her presenting style.
My name is Leah Haddock, and I am an investigative reporter with ep3. I was 17 years old as the events of Limetown unfolded, and I became somewhat of a Limetown news junkie. In the spirit of full disclosure, it is also a personal story to me, as an uncle on my father's side, granted one I only ever heard stories about and never met beyond infancy, Dr. Emil Haddock, is counted as one of the missing. All things considered, it's fair to say that Limetown and the questions it left in my family played a large part in why I became a reporter in the first place. The infamous photo of the devastated father collapsed to his knees outside the gates of Limetown, his hands pulling his hair in outrage and confusion, hangs on the wall above my desk. It seems I was always supposed to tell the story. So, without any further delay, the following report is the first of 7. That's right, 7-part series on Limetown. starting with everything we know up to this point, then quickly moving to the people most affected and what it means to them today.
Yeah, I think we can all agree Leah Haddock's presenting was really good throughout the whole thing. It was slow yet passionate, and it made you really engaged throughout the whole thing, and I appreciate how much context and history she provided throughout the whole thing. So there was never a point where I felt lost or confused, because I feel like when there's so many characters introduced, it's easy you can get confused and a bit lost in the story. But I think the way Leah did it, incredible. I think her presenting style and everything, as well as all the context she gave, again, didn't feel lost once.
You know, I mean, Annie Sage Whitehurst is the voice actress for Leah, and it's really immersive and really gripping, and I think that's something, because you have to, I suppose, with these, find the right person, because you don't want it to be like too exaggeratory or like
of course,
too like quaint, but I think there's a nice little balance. What about you, Busayo?
Yeah, I agree, and it kind of reminds me how a couple of weeks ago we were talking about audiobooks and how like Uncanny was like felt like an audiobook. So I feel like the right presenter and right host for the podcast really does make a difference, and also the fact that she said that this is episode 1 out of a 7-part series shows that like we know what to expect, and we know like where the episodes will be released next. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And just to finish off, my clip is from the end of the episode, and just as Leah is about to finish her investigation for the episode, we get a shocking revelation.
And that was supposed to conclude part 1 of my report. Then something happened. Hello?
God, sorry, my heart's pounding.
It's okay, just take your time.
How do I start? Okay. I have someone you need to talk to.
What do you mean?
She's on the other line.
Who?
Leah, it's a survivor. She wants to speak to you. And only you. I'm gonna put her on now.
But Tara, I don't understand. I mean, why does she want to talk to me? I feel like we should tell someone.
No.
Excuse me?
Miss Haddock, you and I, we are the only ones to speak. No one else. I'm sorry it has to be this way.
How can I believe you?
I'll leave the details with Mr. Elkins.
Terry? Is this real?
Are you still recording?
Okay. Stop recording.
So that's my clip, and it's just really immersive. And like we've been saying, obviously we didn't realise it was fiction until after we've listened to it. Yeah. And obviously listen back, we can kind of tell, because some of the things are a bit exaggerated and some of the actors are a bit like not the best, but
maybe slightly over the top.
Yeah, definitely over the top.
But it's very immersive, and obviously, Molly, you were talking about earlier the fact that people have been binging this and like hoarding episodes. I can see why. Like, it's very reminiscent to like a really like really good Netflix series.
Completely
agree.
It
reminds me of something like Pretty Little Liars or something like that when I was younger. Like,
yeah,
I definitely binged that.
Yeah, although that being said, Skip Bronte, one of the creators of Limetown, has said having an inconsistent release schedule is more like what happens in the real world, because sometimes an episode might just be 40 seconds of breaking news, and I can see where they're coming from with that. It does like adds to the realism
emulates it quite well.
Quotes. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed that little
me too.
So,
me free.
Well, let's go on and talk about whether we thought it was hot or not. Busayo?
Definitely a hot one for me. Even though it's a genre that I dip my toes into, I feel like because it was just so like exaggerated and over the top, it definitely ate for me. How about you, Molly?
I love that. It definitely ate for me. Again, I'd say it's hot. Again, like I said, it's the most visually engaging podcast I've listened to in a long time, and I feel like I've listened to a fair few podcasts. So the fact that this one is the most I can visualize in my mind, 100% hot for me.
Yeah,
I mean, Josh?
I'm not really a fan of true crime. Can't get my words out.
You got this, Josh.
I'm not really a fan of true crime podcasts usually, but I feel like with this one, it's definitely hot. It was just so immersive, and obviously, going into it now, knowing that it's fiction, it does feel a bit like different. But it definitely, I can see the appeal, and it was a good listen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 3 hots all round. Thank you very much.
Slay.
Limetown is available to stream now on all good podcast providers. This has been the Girls That Gossip podcast. Thank you for listening. I've been Josh Reid.
I've been Busayo, all you're doing.
And I've been Molly Woodward.
And make sure you join us next week for some more gossip. Bye.
Bye.